Everyone, my name is Carly Miller and I use the pronoun she, her.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah DuBois and my pronouns are she, her, hers.
Good afternoon, my name is Allie, Parrott and I use she, her pronouns.
Good afternoon, my name is Yamille, Perez and I use she, her, ella pronouns.
Hello everyone, I'm Alicia Herron-Martinez. I use the she, her pronouns as well. Well, welcome. Thank you so much. It's so lovely seeing all of your faces, familiar and new. Thank you again just for joining us and as we discuss our process to creating a WISE unit anti-racism plan. We're just going to talk about how we went about this process, how we got started in implementing this process, this plan, and we're just so glad to share how we approached it. No two people are the same. We consider this a journey that we are all just individually going into, and with full disclosure, we are coming to you all being very vulnerable, and we strive to be better and do better when it comes to anti-racism in our lives and our work. So we will make time, as Alyssa mentioned, at the end for questions or comments. But in the meantime, if you hear something or you feel like sharing in the moment, please do so in the chat. We would love for you all to co-create this knowledge in this space. So welcome. Fantastic. So now I'll briefly cover the session's personal and community agreements. And I disclaim that this is not an exhaustive list, but I would like us to all approach this material and with our individual journeys in mind, with grace for ourselves and others. So starting with, we hope to create a community of care and empathy for ourselves and others. Sometimes knowing we get it wrong, and that's okay. So we are hopefully learning and unlearning in this process. Additionally, ask how rather than why. Allowing ourselves for spaciousness and possibility. With that, we'll go further and deeper because of it. Next, we hope that you allow yourself to get closer to your stretch zone. Lean into the discomfort. It's totally good for things to get sticky, muddy, and somewhat awkward. That means that we're doing the work. And then also we hope that we respect confidentiality. So what's said here stays here, but what is learned here, we hope leaves here. So, and at any point right now, if you feel like you want to add or amend any of these things, please do so in the chat if you feel comfortable. Fantastic. So we borrowed the abbreviated version of the official Iowa State's land acknowledgement statement. So we wanted just to create the space to acknowledge, the land that we all are here sharing this wonderful event. So thanks to Iowa State for hosting this, ISCORE. So I'll just read the statement now. We would like to begin this event with a land acknowledgement. Iowa State University is located on the ancestral lands and territory of the Bakota or Iowa Nation. The United States obtained the land from the Meskwaki and Sauk Nations in the Treaty of 1842. We wish to recognize our obligations to this land and the people who took care of it, as well as to the 17,000 Native people who live in Iowa today. So as for the flow, so today's objectives for the session, we hope to give you all some context and background information pertinent to our office's anti-racism plan. We'll go over some definitions, we'll discuss the process, some of the barriers and our strategies to overcome, our plan and implementation, and then we'll go into closing thoughts and future considerations. And then from there, we'll go open to Q&A. Objectives, why are we doing this? Why are we here? But we hope that by sharing our experience, it encourages others across campus to create an anti-racism plan. This process, again, does not require you to be an expert to get started in anti-racism work. None of us in WISE are experts, so rest assured. Additionally, by us sharing our story, we hope that you take away some call to action or ideas from our process into creating your own and subsequently a unit anti-racist plan. We will walk you through our approach of this ongoing work, how we've kept each other accountable, and emphasize the importance of revisiting your own individual plan as best as, as often as you feel for you, as a way to recalibrate and revise when needed. It is my belief that one person, one office can make a difference. But before we move forward, we would like to disclaim WISE did not create the ISCORE to Action with Anti-Racism framework. The ISCORE to Action document is available to you all on the ISCORE and CORE website. And our intent, again, is to reiterate that this is a tool available to you and is a great starting point that we used to frame this action plan as individuals and then as in our unit.
So to provide a little bit of context and background about our office, so our office falls underneath that diversity and equity inclusion lens as being part of the work that we're charged with, the mission, what we're all passionate about. And so that is very much infused into the culture of our office, what we value. So as we approached this anti-racism framework, that was very much a piece of going into this. Additionally, we started about a year ago undergoing a program self-study, which included an external review. And throughout this process, it was really taking a hard look at our policies and practices. What were we doing? What were we not doing? What are things that we need to be changing, thinking about differently, especially as we're putting on this lens of anti-racism and how we can best support our students and help them to be successful. But if we were to narrow it down to maybe an impetus for actually starting this anti-racism plan was surrounding, early summer of 2020 around the killing of George Floyd and other surrounding events that really led to our book club, which then led to the plan. But we'll get into that more. Yamille, if you advance to the next one. So I mentioned briefly that we participated in reading How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi. And so we wanted to provide some definitions, especially here at the start, as we talk about racist and anti-racist. So racist, one who is supporting a racist policy through their actions or inaction or expressing a racist idea. Anti-racist, one who is supporting an anti-racist policy through their actions or expressing an anti-racist idea. And we've also included the definition for intersectionality here, as its intersectionality is very broad, but this holds a lot of meaning for our office, especially with the students that we serve in the intersection of gender as well as race. So intersectionality, all racial groups are a collection of intersectional identities differentiated by gender, sexuality, class, ethnicity, skin color, nationality, and culture, among a series of other identifiers.
So like Carly mentioned, we read How to Be Anti-Racist this summer. And originally, when we decided to do it as a WISE team at first, and as we were having conversations about it, and this is when everyone was still working from home, we were all kind of feeling a little bit isolated from our colleagues on campus, and someone brought forth the idea of opening it up to our entire unit in the provost office. And I think this was something a lot of us, really had to think about, because we thought like, oh, well, we're certainly not the experts. Like, should we be the one leading this charge? Is that our responsibility? And as we were really talking through it, we thought, we just have to go for it. Let's see if folks are interested. Let's go from there. And so we did it. Folks were interested, and it ended up being a really great opportunity for us. And we didn't know it at the time, but it was a catalyst for us starting this office anti-racism plan. Not only in our professional lives, but I think in our personal lives as well. I'll say though, you don't have to read How to Be Anti-Racist to start this process. You can really, the important thing is to start, and to start from wherever you are. This was just where it ended up being for us. So like I mentioned, we read the book, and then we read the book and we decided that we wanted to do our individual anti-racism plans first. So really going off of this idea that you have to put your own mask on before you can put the mask on of others, and doing that self-work first. So we use the template created by the ISCORE office, the Professional Development Action Plan, as a way to hold us all accountable and really to have tangible takeaway items that we could look to. That was one really key thing from the book, is that we didn't want to just read the book and then pat ourselves on the back. We wanted to take it a step further. And you can go to the next slide, Yamille. So as we shared our individual plans as folks were comfortable doing that. And then we identified common themes, if there were overlapping themes that a lot of people had in their individual plans. That's when we moved forth to talk about, like, is that something we need to put in our overall office plan? And I'll mention too that this was not a quick process. We really took our times to do both our individual plan and our office plan. Like, this was a process that took place over the course of several months. It was not a quick, or it wasn't an easy process. So I just want to mention that I'm talking about it like it happened very quickly, but it was a slow process as it happened. And that this is really, it's always an evolving journey. It's something that should always be in draft mode. You know, creating the individual plan, creating the office plan is not something to say like, okay, I'm done. I did it. I did my anti-racism work. It is something you should always be adding to. You should always be modifying. I know I just looked back on my individual plan as we were getting ready for this presentation, because I hadn't looked at it for a couple months, to say like, okay, where am I? What have I done? What do I need to continue to do? So it's really great in that way to hold you accountable. And you can go to the next one, Yamille. So here is the ISCORE Professional Development Action Plan created by the ISCORE office. So as you can see, it really has it laid out for you really, really easily to be able to work on it. There's, we tried to bold the categories there just so you could see them a little bit better, but there's opportunities, barriers and struggles, your support team, the implementation plan, and then at the bottom, there's also resources for you. So we're gonna go through, we're gonna talk about these each individually. Allie's gonna share about the barriers and struggles.
Thanks, Sarah. So as Sarah mentioned or pointed out, there is a section in the action plan where you can include those barriers and strategies. And there are a lot. This is not easy by any means. Again, individually we did this. We wrote down as we were creating our individual anti-racist plans, and then as a staff, we also really brainstormed or anticipated what that could look like in terms of barriers. So I'm going to ask you all to think for a moment. If you were to create an individual anti-racism action plan, maybe you already are, maybe you're doing this work already, what might be some barriers? And you can feel free to include in the chat, you know, what would the barriers or struggles be if you were to do this as a unit? Thank you, you're already sharing. And if you don't feel comfortable sharing or want to share anonymously, you can also send a message to Alyssa and she will go ahead and share your comments anonymously. So if you just want to take a few moments to share, we would appreciate it. There's a great wealth of knowledge in this room and folks who've been doing this work for a very long time. Mindy, great point. We are definitely on different stages of our journey in different places. Absolutely, Justin. How do you create that buy-in? often unsafe for BIPOC folks to express the need for anti-racism space that's overwhelmingly white, being on a PWI. Time commitment, absolutely. Thank you. These are great. Natasha Green, temptation to see it as not our job, even though it is crucial to all of us at Iowa State. So I can share, as I was creating my individual anti-racism plan, action plan, I have had many of these that are already shared. Time, how am I going to schedule and prioritize? Because I need to dive deeper in this work, in this anti-education or anti-racism education. Self-awareness, I try to be mindful and thoughtful, but I can't see what I can't see sometimes. I'm going to say racist things. I'm going to act in racist ways. And how am I going to hold myself accountable? Resistance by others is, you know, when you're having these conversations with peers, and I think it's harder when you're closer with folks to have these conversations. And also, what would my supervisor think, and would they be supportive as well? So those were some of my personal ones, and I appreciate you all sharing as well. Thanks, Yamille. So we actually got together again as a group and shared some of those similarities in terms of what barriers we were anticipating. First one is personal fear. Absolutely. It's a risk every time that you take pushback, resistance from others. That was very common. And the last one, I think someone already mentioned in the chat, was the decentralized nature of Iowa State, and of course the pandemic going on, technology, everyone is zoomed out. So those are just a few of the many barriers. And then we also got together and talked about, well, what are some of these strategies? And so I would ask that folks, again, you've been great in the chat so far, include maybe some of these strategies, whether they're listed here, of some of the themes, personal fear, pushback, resistance, the pandemic, or some strategies for those barriers listed in the chat. And I'll go through some of the strategies that we came up with as a staff. Continual push for anti-racist education, absolutely. Starting small. Thank you, Mindy. Incorporating time into the staff meetings, absolutely. Prioritizing, blocking time. These are fantastic. Thank you for sharing. Please feel free to keep sharing in the chat. In terms of the personal fear strategy that we talked about as a staff, it's really about finding that support group, and on the action plan, it gives you an opportunity to list who those support folks would be in your group. So really talking through a lot of the concerns we were having individually. I think one of the concerns that came up was, will we be excluded from the table? Would WISE be excluded from the table if we spoke up? You know, again, there's just that fear of saying something that's going to be harmful to another individual. But really trying to let go of that fear and being able to hold each other accountable for what we're doing. In terms of the pushback, resistance strategy. This is difficult because this is every situation is different. There's no one size fits all strategy or solution. And we just really talked about being mindful of the approach, kind of assessing the situation, who's delivering it, that communication, how it's being delivered, when is it being delivered, and again, just talking to that support team, that support crew through those situations. And lastly, as a strategy to the decentralization in the pandemic, really collaborating and communicating as much as possible with those folks on campus. So the provost office, there were great folks that in our small groups from the book group that we could lean on and ask questions and say, hey, is your unit going through this? Yeah, what are you anticipating? And that was a really great resource to have. These are great strategies. We are going to capture all of these if that's okay. Well, again, our plan is evolving. So a common thought that went through my head, and I think I can speak for the rest of our staff and maybe a lot of the folks participating on this call today, is how much power can I have in my role at Iowa State as a student, as a staff, as a faculty member? How can I change policies? How can I change structures? And what Dr. Kendi points out is that we all have the power to do something, whether that's continuing anti-racist education, joining a Me and White Supremacy book circle that the Sloss Center has been hosting, using your voice in committee meetings, search committee meetings, speaking up about the inclusiveness of a job description that maybe your unit is hiring. There's so many different examples, I think, out there, and the more you talk with people, the more you'll learn what kind of power you have. And I think for this team, throughout this process, we've learned that once you start to reflect, write it down, and talk with each other, I think we realized just how much power we had, and to make that change. And that's why we're encouraged by other folks on this campus, believing that they can also make that change as a unit. So I'm going to hand it over to Yamille, and she's going to kind of provide an overview of our anti-racist action plan as a staff.
Thanks, Allie. So as you noticed, we put together a list of items in our general plan when we put our plan together as an office. And I think it ended up with maybe 8 or 9 things with like subtopics. But for the purposes of this presentation, we generalize them into 2 high-level actions. One is anti-racist policies, and the other, which we'll talk about later, is representation and access. And so within anti-racist policies, some of the things that we are doing and will continue to be doing around anti-racist work is hold each other accountable, not just as an office, but individually. Many of the other staff members that have already spoken talked about their individual plans. And so how do we revisit, and how often do we revisit our individual plans, as well as the office level plan, to ensure that we are holding each other accountable? And sometimes things change. As we all know, COVID has been an interesting time the last year that we've been in remote work or some type of setup along those lines. But how do we progress in the future? And I think long-term, the goal for our office is not just to hold each other accountable, but to have a community within the university that we can all hold each other accountable. So not just within WISE, but WISE to other units back to WISE, and saying, hey, did you think about this? And maybe that statement was said, or this is on your website. Is that really the right wording for it, or the right way to communicate those ideas? So one thing that it was actually in one of the chats was creating a place in staff meetings to talk about racist and anti-racist moments. We implemented this, I think, right around when we finished the book club. So it would have been around August, September timeframe. And for this presentation, we're actually, a few of us are going to share as if we were in our staff meeting. So Sarah, can you share an anti-racist or racist moment that you would normally share in staff meeting?
Yeah, I actually shared this. This is a racist moment that I shared in staff meeting a couple of weeks ago. So I have kids in the Ames Community School District, which I know a lot of you on the call do too. And so I was talking with a friend about the recent Black Lives Matter curriculum that Ames did in February. And, as we were having this conversation, my friend said the words, "But I don't want my kids to see color." And it was one of those moments, like, you feel it in your gut, you know it's wrong, and then I didn't say anything. And the conversation continued, and I didn't go back to it. And of course, now I think I go back and I think of all the things like, well, I could have said, well, like, what do you mean? Or, you know, of course your kids are going to see color, but I didn't do any of that in the moment. And so it is just one of those reminders that as much as you're working and you're moving ahead, you're always going to be growing, and there's always those moments that you're going to have when you know you've done better.
Thanks for sharing, Sarah. And I'll share one quickly. My best friend and her husband and their family, I've known them since we were in college. It's been like 15, 16 years now, and we've never really had conversations around race. But recently, it's a topic that comes up pretty often. We even went into a conversation about the medical field and how it impacts BIPOC individuals differently, how each of us perceive race and ethnicity from a different standpoint. And so it's, to me, I love the fact that my work is now impacting my personal life and I'm being able to take things away. And so I think Allie and I were chatting yesterday about how, yes, we are here as a WISE staff, but we are individuals that make up the WISE office. And so we hope that you can implement something similar at your level. Continued engagement in anti-racism work. You know, if you would have asked any of us a year ago if we were going to be presenting at ISCORE, we would have probably said no. But here we are. We're trying to be vulnerable and encourage all of you to consider what can you do at your office level. What do you have the power to do, like Allie was saying. And some of the things that our office is doing is, you know, we've participated in other spaces to continue these conversations. So I think most of us on the call have participated in the SLA Center's Me and White Supremacy Book Club, Book Circle, participating even in the ISCORE Professional Development Academy. We have members in that, in the planning committee. I'm also a dual appointment with 4-H, and so I participate there in a race and ethnicity champions group and having conversations about how to impact youth in these spaces. So continuing our work beyond what we're doing just in the WISE office. And then the last one on this slide is about expanding conversations with partners, and primarily just units and departments on campus, bringing this to the forefront as we go into other spaces. But also we have, and I'm going to switch slides here. We have a advisory council that is the WISE Advisory Council, made up of Iowa State members, but also some other corporate partners, as well as community engagement folks that help us kind of lay the groundwork for WISE, maybe support us financially, et cetera. And so in the fall, we actually had, we've had 2-hour virtual meetings for the last year, probably every 3 to 4 months. And so in the fall, we carved out a big portion to show them our anti-racism plan. And I don't know if if Carly has yet, but Carly will share our actual document, so that you'll get a side box in the chat here in a second that will lead you to a PDF document that is our latest version of our anti-racism plan. But we shared that document with them, and other folks also mentioned about Anonymous. So this is Jamboard, Google Jamboard, and we allowed them to share how they want to engage and participate with the WISE anti-racism plan. These are folks that we bring in to interact with our students throughout the year. And so we wanted to have this conversation. We also asked them what their corporations are doing in these spaces, or their organizations as a whole are doing around anti-racism, around race and ethnicity and awareness and DE&I. So you can see some of their feedback here. And we'll continue to have conversations as our meetings progress. And hopefully when we get back in person, it'll still be a part of our conversations with our advisory council. I'm going to go ahead and move over into our other kind of bucket of action items for our implementation plan around representation and access. And the first piece is scholarships. As we all know, the university as a whole gives scholarships. WISE at our level, we have a scholarship or various scholarships that we provide students. And so a few years ago, this scholarship got moved from being using GPA and SAT, ACT scores to be provided to being truly a need-based scholarship, allowing greater access to individuals that maybe didn't have the scores, but are still trying to go to college or still trying to be better. And so we've moved that to remove bias. We don't, when we evaluate these scholarship applications, we don't see their names, we don't see their majors, we don't see their hometown, if they're in-state or out-of-state, if they're international, it doesn't matter as long as they are female identifying and they are looking for a major in STEM. That's all we care about. We just read their essay, and that's how we grant our scholarships. So that was one of our first steps moving in that direction. And I'll have Sarah share a little bit about how to engage diverse population.
Yeah, so this was an item that I had on my individual plan. So I organize a career conference for middle school and high school girls called Go Further. And I have received feedback like in the last couple of years that I didn't really have a diverse population of presenters for the conference. And, you know, I received that feedback and I was like, yeah, that's valid. But I also, prior to reading this book, kind of took the like, well, what can I do about it? Like, it's, you know, shoot, like, I wish there were more, but, you know, there's nothing I can really do, this very like hands-off approach. And after reading the book, there's a part where Dr. Kendi talks about there's either racist or anti-racist programs and policies. And it just hit me that my program was racist. It wasn't anti-racist, so it was racist. And also going back to what Allie said earlier about power, it was my program. And I could control how that program's run, who I'm putting in front of the students. You know, that was something within my realm of control. And I don't think that I had really realized that or acknowledged that before. So since then, I take a much more active role in what I expect from presenters, making sure there's like diverse images utilized. I now own that, where before I didn't own that. And so now I take ownership, and whether or not I'm presenting that the way that I really want to be in this new like anti-racist framework.
It's definitely hard work to look at our programs and say, this isn't right, and how can we change that? But we all have the power to do so. I think another piece for us in that kind of diverse representation, you know, we're all in committees. Our staff, we're a small staff, but we're in a lot of spaces. And so we've been looking around the table and saying, who else is not here? You know, should this office be here? Should this department or unit be represented because of the audience that they themselves represent? And so how can we broaden that? So I encourage you, as you form committees, or, you know, as you look at your current committees that you're part of on campus, who isn't at the table, whose voice isn't being acknowledged and recognized in that space? And I'll have Carly share a little bit or a lot about our marketing and communications, which is a big piece of what we've been doing lately.
Yes, great. So also as part of our plan, it was a common theme amongst a lot of our individual plans around our marketing and communications, our website, you know, what our brochures were saying, basically what our appearance was to our outside audience and to our students. And so through this process, we've really taken a hard look at not only the language, re-envisioning things that it is going away from binary type of language, making sure that our photos, the representation that we're showing is not just centered on whiteness. So that's been a huge part in being more critical and taking a closer eye at not only just our website, but as well as social media and what it is that we're sharing, who we're sharing, who we are following, all those different pieces, and taking it from this lens of anti-racism work as we think about our office and how we are communicating not only with our students, but all of our stakeholders.
Thank you for sharing, Carly. So as you can imagine, it's not an easy feat. Carly's taken the lead on this, but has had a lot of other folks kind of review and provide feedback. She's like, what about this? And so we've gone back and forth a lot. And the WISE website got a refresh. What are we calling it? An update. I think it officially launched last week. So if you haven't been, maybe go. But as you can see, there's so many things. And now that some of these pieces are rolling and already working, we ourselves now need to revise our plan again and say, okay, what's the next 6 months, or what's the priority for the next 6 to 12 months? And in our office, we're also going through a hiring of a new director. So how does that impact? But this is work that we want to continue to do. And so we're going to reevaluate and see where we can go over the next few months, even before a new director is hired. So I encourage you to look at your plan, and we'll pass it to Alicia.
There it is. Okay. Fantastic. So, hello. Closing thoughts and future considerations. So we hope that after this discussion that you feel encouraged to create your own anti-racism plan. Again, if you're not sure where to start, you can reach out to us. You can reach out to folks in the ISCORE office. But also for that document, you can visit the ISCORE NCORE website and download the template to start. So it's pretty simple. And then lastly, we wanted to leave you all with this quote. No one becomes racist or anti-racist. We can only strive to be one or the other, by Dr. Kendi. And, because the simplicity of this quote, at least for me, when I see it, I think of hope. And I believe that individually, we all have the power and choice to strive to be better. And it is in each of us, in fact, to choose to start, even when it's uncomfortable, knowing you will make mistakes and get things wrong, do it anyways. There's tons of support out there. You can reach out to us. We're happy to create alliances across campus and continue this work on a broader scale. So at any rate, we're open to chat with you. So now we're open. Let's converse.
There are a few questions in the chat, so I'd like to encourage people to continue putting questions there or unmute to ask them, whatever you're most comfortable with. So one of them is, what has the office conversation looked like around implementing the anti-racist plan within the WISE learning community and with your peer mentors?
I'll start, but then I'm gonna pass on. So we actually don't have a learning community or peer mentors in that fashion. So our office is here to serve all undergraduate students that identify as female or majoring in a STEM field. So all of our, like I said, all of our marketing pieces, that's going out to all of our students, over 5,000. But where I think we may be able to answer a little bit to what the attendees question, I'll pivot to Alicia and through our course, which actually Dr. Monique Benkin and two of the peer facilitators just had a session right before in the 1 o'clock time slot. So some of you may have been able to see that about equitable leadership, but I'll pivot to Alicia so she can explain a little bit more about how this anti-racism work also is being used with our students, but through a course basis.
Yes, thank you, Carly. And I'll take it back to the training that I conducted virtually with our peer facilitators, because they were the folks who are engaging and interacting with our first year students in this leadership course. So just a little background, if you don't know, we partnered with Leadership Studies. We created this first year leadership course. It's been going on for 7 years now. And, it's all about, interpersonal development, more so engaging with leadership foundation, some leadership knowledge. But this year, this last iteration of the course, it was, as Carly mentioned, titled Equitable Leadership. So it was given the context with everything going on and that was happening in our world, still is. We really felt the need to emphasize a social justice lens and social justice education. And so in the training that I conducted in the summer before the class, we had a whole module on DEI, how to conduct crucial conversations, how to engage with this work, lots of grace. I provided tons of materials, resources, podcasts, videos, readings, articles for our student leaders to engage with so that they can feel equipped to have these conversations with our first-year students. And we hope that our first-year students gain this great foundation around social justice and inclusion, especially within the context of STEM, which is very unique and niche in itself. So just adding that layer of intersectionality of female identifying students in STEM, also social justice oriented. We hope that they gain a good foundation from the first semester that they're on campus, so they can continue to build off it throughout their career at Iowa State. Great question. Did I miss anything?
Alyssa, were there any other questions? Otherwise, I saw there was one for me in the chat.
There is one for you in the chat. There's another question as well, asking about kind of the technical pieces of your scholarships and whether you use information from the FAFSA solely for need-based scholarships, or do you look at other aspects?
Okay, I'm going to give that one to Allie, and then I'll answer the next one about Go Further.
Yeah, this has definitely evolved over the years, I would say, and I would be happy to chat offline. Please feel free to message me. We worked with the folks over in Student Financial Aid, Aaron Schwartz and Westman. They've been awesome in helping us kind of navigate that piece of it, because FAFSA does not include students who cannot fill out those forms, our international students or DACA students. And so there's more to it, and I would love to share and talk more about it, because it has made a huge difference.
Well, I can answer the one about Go Further, which is just how did you try to find a more diverse speakers? What actions did you take to diversify your programs? What challenges did you run into? So one of the main ways is, so we have keynote speakers for Go Further. And traditionally we've had one keynote speaker who has been a white woman in STEM. And so one of the actions I took was to divide that up. So over the course of the conference, to have a different keynote speaker each day, because we had like so many other great speakers. So that was one action I took, because I could be intentional about like choosing who those speakers were. And then I would say reaching out to specific like student groups too, and even people who I have known who have like presented in the past at conferences. So trying to advertise as much as possible to say like, hey, you can present, you can speak at the conference. So being more mindful about the ways that I'm advertising the opportunities to speak or to present at the conference. I'll also mention too, like I put together like a video too of even, I was noticing sometimes that, you know, there wouldn't be like a diverse representation in a presenter's presentation, that it would mainly be like, you know, white women in STEM. And so I have listed out now, and it's in my video that I created, of like, hey, so when you're putting together your presentation, try to be mindful of, you know, the images that you're using. I put in like some examples of like more inclusive images, just to try to bring that to light for folks. You know, as far as like challenges, I think it hasn't been like in a lot of, you know, like, I think that's one thing, is that like, it's been easy. And so it makes me think like, you know, why didn't I do it sooner? Why didn't I take more ownership of it sooner? Because I think that's one thing, is I have that power, I have that privilege to really make it what I want. And it's still, I have not arrived. There's still a lot more work that can be done. But I think I'm aware of it and I'm acknowledging it now.
There is another question that's come in. Your entire board or your entire office seems to be on board, which is fantastic. What suggestions do you have for grassroots efforts that anyone can incorporate to help change their culture in their department or their unit?
I love you all. So this did come up in the book group that we were participating in. You know, there are folks that were representing a certain office, but they came back and they said, "No, there's no way that we are going to be able to do this as a unit." So that's a huge challenge, I think, and it goes into a lot with trust and care and support, and that creating that culture of care, as Dr. Ankar and Santos talk about so much in the College of Engineering. All we can do is really talk to each other at this point. We are not the experts. I think, again, there are lots of folks, and if you have strategies, please feel free to include them in the chat, but it is not an overnight piece. This team, with Laura Lee Crystal here for 20 years, we have been very intentional about having these conversations, building this trust so that we get to a point to do this work individually and together. So I don't know that any of us have a quick solution for this, other than we are here to help in any way we can, but we just found, just by talking with colleagues across units, that was at least a start. I don't know if others have anything to contribute on that.
You know, I'll just add, so one thing that I think was new that we did this year is that we, you know, closed our office in order to attend ISCORE. So we can all, like, you know, be present and to attend ISCORE. And so maybe it's something that's like, hey, you know, let's go to ISCORE as a team, or, you know, whatever that looks like. But maybe that's just a starting point, as just like, you know, an opening up that door, and maybe that would lead to other conversations.
Alicia, any other questions on HUVA?
I don't see any more questions, but if anyone has any last minute questions or comments, please feel free to share.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Ani. I am so empowered by listening to you ladies. I mean, you're just amazing. And I know Yamille always does great things in our champions group and all the meetings she's in. But I really appreciate what you shared, like how a unit can be, you know, transforming. I appreciated that very much. Thank you.
I just want to thank all the folks. There's so many folks on this call right now, and just looking through, you all have given grace on our journeys, and so I just want to say a personal thank you to folks on this call, and continue to hold. I think we are all open to being held accountable, so please keep reaching out, and we appreciate it. These are gifts, as Marie Beecham has just included in her social media. Sarah and I were just talking about that today. These are gifts. So if you aren't following Marie Beecham, she's a student at Iowa State, please do, because she is wise, very wise.
I think Mindy just sent in a question. Without a book club, what other ideas do you have to somewhat force continual conversations?
don't know if others want to take this, but I think it's going to, we're still early on in this, right? We started off with a book group and completing the action plan, but, you know, of course, when our new director comes in, this is something that we are committed to as a staff. You know, what does that look like in our goals for the year, our reviews, and again, those continuing conversations in our staff meetings is going to continue to evolve. Yeah, you don't want folks to feel forced to participate. So even just having those one-on-one conversations, I think has been the most beneficial for me personally.
I was gonna add, I think there's things that I'm relatively new to the office. I've only been with the office for about 18 months. And so there were things that the office was already doing before we read the book. There were things that we were already acknowledging and noticing how go further in its explanation, it said girls. And so we've now changed that to female identifying with a parentheses to add more clarification to be more inclusive in that sense. We noticed we used to have a page on the website which no longer exists, but in that page there were some things that were missing and some pieces that were centered on whiteness, and we noticed that even before this book club, and we started changing those things. So maybe starting with like, what are things that you notice in our spaces, in our offices, that are simple wins, easy quick wins that you can change, that you don't have to read a book, you don't even have to write the action plan, but what can you be doing? Can you change the way that your scholarships are awarded or the representation on your website, etc., so that other folks can feel included when they look at your spaces?
I'd also just like to add, at an individual level, I think, you know, showing up to a session like this is engaging with this work, reaching out to your friends, your spheres of influence, your community, your family, people who you feel comfortable enough to have these vulnerable conversations with and engage with it. I think it's really important to educate yourself. There's so many resources out there. You just type into Google, there's YouTube videos, there's podcasts. If you like to read, there's tons of books out there. So just really starting with educating yourself at an individual level will help you feel, or not, empowered to, you know, have more agency in having these conversations with others. But I would say start small, start in your spheres of influence, and talk with your other white people, like where you feel comfortable having these conversations, and then eventually continuing to build that those allyships across accomplices, because we need more accomplices in higher ed especially, but at a societal level, in your community. Yeah, I just feel like it's really important to educate yourself first. That's how we started. That's how I went about it, because I'm still learning. But
so I have a question for you, and this is kind of balancing, you know, trying to do the right thing without putting pressure or burdens on people inadvertently. And so when you have a group or a program that has a small diverse population, how do you increase that visible diversity without putting those particular students always on the spot to be that representation? And so I've been participating in Spark for the last several years, and that's one of those things that comes up. And so some people really want to talk about these issues and they're open to other people approaching, and other people are like, why do I always have to be the one to explain this to you? And you know, where they are, they feel kind of burdened by that. And so how do you avoid doing that to somebody with good intentions, but still placing additional burdens?
I'll start, I guess. I know we're over time, but I think thank you for that, because as a BIPOC individual, I think that's something that is very important, and we've acknowledged that. So we don't want to pinpoint individual folks and say, hey, you're Hispanic, we're going to feature you because you're Hispanic. Like, that's not the point. but we want to allow individuals that feel comfortable in sharing their stories to be featured. And so one of the pieces over the last year that from a social media standpoint was you nominated yourself to be featured for Hispanic Heritage Month or Black History Month. We featured individual folks that they nominated themselves or other folks could nominate them. But we don't want them to be the ones to educate us either. We want to continue to educate ourselves and push the boundaries without having to be educated by our BIPOC population, because we are a primarily white office, white staff office. And so how do we do that, and how do we push the boundaries without just giving it over to students of color and say, here, you carry this? It's not up to them, it's up to us to do the work. And so how do we continue to do that? I don't know if other folks want to add.
I would agree with Yamille. I mean, I think it's important to elevate student voices if they want to, you know, and I know there's been a lot of listening sessions that have happened, and students should have that platform. I think it's interesting right now, and then Sarah and I are having this conversation of white anti-racist educators right now, and there's conversation with Austin Channing Brown and Robin DiAngelo and white fragility, and it's really interesting. And I will share one of my aha moments was being in a session with Robin DiAngelo, and but why did it take a white woman for me to listen to that? And so folks like Austin Channing Brown or a Black woman is saying, no, we've been saying this for a long time, hear us. And we've done this work for a very long time. And so also listening directly and not, I think, Sarah, what was it? The white interpreters listening directly. If BIPOC folks are putting that information out, listening directly. Are we over time? Okay.
We are over time,
Yeah.
and you have answered all of the questions. Thank you so much. This was a really great session.
Allie, because you said you raised about Robin DiAngelo, I don't know if this makes sense, but it's just kind of interesting that, you know, all the backlash happening with Robin DiAngelo and the money that's siphoned because of, you know, well, do you have any thoughts on that? Like, you know, and why is it like it takes always a person from a dominant group to tell our story? We cannot, you know, the stories we tell is not good enough.
Yeah, we're spinning on that. I'm spinning on that right now, especially with this conversation happening. I don't know, Sarah, if you want to share more. I haven't actually watched the video yet.
Yeah, I know that. I mean, for me, I watched that video, and you know, White Fragility was the first anti-racism book that I read, not the first book to be written about anti-racism at all, even close. And you know, so that really struck me that is what it took for me, and that's not okay. And so that's something that I'm still processing that, I think, and something that I'm definitely going to be mindful of in the future going forward is to be listening to BIPOC folk on this, because I can't possibly know or understand. And so that's who I really need to be listening to.
And, you know, if you look at the cost of the books also, like, for example, now you want to talk about Black, or now you want to talk about race, you know, it's the same topic, the same conversation, but the cost of the books are so different. Why is that, you know? And so that bothers me sometimes, you know, to think that we need, you know, white folks to, I'm using the word white folks, please forgive me for saying that, but you know, we need people to uplift us. Our voice is not good enough to be, or to share the story sometimes makes me feel. Somebody did snaps on you, thank you. Thank you, Alicia. No, it's just, thank you for, it's a great presentation, and I appreciate all of you kind of being, and Sarah, I think I shared this to Yamille, that being so vulnerable, being so open about how you encountered your own, you know, values was very powerful. Thank you. Thank you. We have to meet you all in person, Yamille. You have to do this for us. Bye, ladies.
Thanks for joining us, Annie.
No, thank you. Bye.
Okay, I guess if there's nothing else, I'm gonna go ahead and, I'm the Zoom host, so I'm gonna go ahead and close the room. Thanks again, everyone.